What's good with it in the hood with it? Welcome back to the Collective Clips, where you already know we get it in. But before we get it in, let's hit that like and subscribe button. Ding. Put your notification bell on all, so that way you're directed in the direction of the dope content I'm kicking. And I highly appreciate all the support, man. We're going up on this channel, and it's all because of you. And for that, I can say I'm very humbled and I'm appreciative. Thank you so much. So I wanted to talk, I was asked, about a certain group, a certain prison gang in California that's not really spoken on too much. I mean, I have heard it mentioned on YouTube, on social media a few times. Quite recently, it's been mentioned a lot more than it has in the past. And that's a group that's not really spoken on too much. And I guess because they're not the biggest prison gang, but they do make an impact. I mean, as you see in that new Folsom video the other day, that was kind of going semi-viral, that everybody was talking about, that pegada that happened in that day room. The independent writers, okay? When you hear the word writers, you automatically assume or think about the Northern Writers. A group that was started and founded by, allegedly Mauricio Snoop Vasquez, Maurice. And, it's a group that's grown over the years. It's been established now for 15 plus years, maybe even 20 years. And it's grown in numbers and size within the California system, especially on the other side, the non-active side, or they consider themselves active, but on the SNY side. Now, they are integrating them groups with other prison gangs, with general population. So there's a lot of guerra, there's a lot of war, man. California has flipped. The system has flipped, whereas the traditional Big Four and the groups and gangs like Southsiders and Norteños and, of course, Woods and Skins and Crips and Bloods, Kumis, all these different groups that frequent the general population yards, in the past have always been at some type of war. There's always been at least one or two groups on lockdown. There's always a situation. And that's just convicts, people in prison trying to maintain on them yards, trying to remain the dominant group, trying to hold it down for their people. So there's always going to be some type of, discrepancies. There's going to be some type of shit that happens. It's just the way it is. There's always going to be one or two bad apples that, go on a yard and feel some type of way. And then there's a breakdown in communication. There's a breakdown in conversation, and it escalates, But most things that happen in the California system happen within your own group. That's well known and documented. That's just how it goes down. There's always going to be a lot of cleanups, a lot of taking out the trash, a lot of pegadas, a lot of rolling people up, getting off on your own. It just happens time and time again. There's always someone fucking up, or someone that comes in with bad paperwork, or someone who messes up along the way and causes a situation, and then they're either DP'd, regulated, checked, or removed. That's facts. And every group does it. Every single group has their reasons why. Some are a little bit more lenient than others. Some, you're one and done. Others, you might get a second chance, but you're watched very close. And there's repercussions. If you go on a yard and you're part of a certain group and you fuck up, and your group, happens to be one of those that they want to educate you and enlighten you into the, what you did wrong, then they may make you do some cleanups. You might have to get put on frontline status, do the next pegada, be involved in the next, kick off the next melee, or, it could be something as simple as writing an essay or working on yourself, your mind, your body, everything. So going out there and doing an exhausting workout, tearing your body down and rebuilding it into the form of a soldado. So there's a lot of different reasons why these gangs or groups in the California system do what they do. And that's what separates California from the rest, from every other state. And I'm not saying they're downer or they're harder than every other state. It's just these programs have been established for a long time. So in about the 2000s, when the SN yards started to become deeper than the general population yards, a lot of gangs started popping up. Gangs like Northern Riders, the 2-5ers, okay, are talked about a lot. And they are a group comprised, well, now they have a little bit of everyone, every ethnicity, race, or whatever you want to call it. But the dominant numbers in that group are dropout Southerners, guys from the South Side, whether it be from Bakersfield on back or even upstaters. This was a group that decided to defect or go against, one of the Big Four. And they were comprised, like I said, of mostly guys from Southern California. And they were considered Enemy 101 for a long time with one of the Big Four, just because They knew some of the secrets. There was even vatos that were part, of different organizations that defected or fell off for whatever reason or got pushed away and then decided that they were going to start their own group. So, the 2-5s are pretty deep on the SNY yards and kind of maintain control on a lot of those yards. They were started and founded in Chino Prison and by just a handful of guys that decided that if for no other reason they were going to go against the grain and they were going to challenge the Mexican mafia. Let's just put it out there, right? I don't like to say their names. I respect what they got going on, but they allegedly, were going to challenge that group and go against the grain and quickly realized, man, that was an adversary you don't want to go up against. So now the 2-5ers are spoken on a lot. They're talked about. They've been involved in a lot just because I think they're the oldest dropout gang in the state of California that's documented, that's known, right? Then, of course, you have the Northern Riders, who probably are the largest group just because of the number of and kind of the geographical. You got a lot of guys from Northern California, but their books are open to guys from Southern California. So they have a little bit of everything as well. There's whites, ex-Woods, ex-skinheads, brothers, everything involved in that group. But that group, again, just like the 2-5ers being from Southern California, is mostly a group of ex-Northerners or ex-Norteños that, did their thing. Now there's offshoots like the Nuestra Cosa and just different offshoots of that gang. And they're even comprised of different smaller, dropout gangs that decided to spring up like Sucker Free and all these different gangs. And they eventually went into the fold of the Northern Riders because they were the bigger group. They were the one that outlasted the most. Now you have a gang that started in Riverside County Jail. And this is the group that's not spoken on a lot, the Independent Riders. Okay, so when you hear the word Riders, like I said, a lot of people get them mixed up with the Northern Riders, but they're their own entity, their own group, their own gang. And these guys are comprised, or they started, like I said, out of Riverside County Jail. And I'm going to give you the history. So the individual who started it was actually a guy that wanted to be a 2-5er. He wanted to become that for whatever reason. And they felt that he wasn't cut. He wasn't cut from that cloth because they have their rules. See, a lot of people think with these dropout gangs or what are considered dropout gangs that they just allow anyone to join their ranks. They just allow anyone. But there's a lot of these groups that have rules. They have a constitution or certain standards. In some of these groups, you have to do pegadas to become involved. You have to have good paperwork. You can't have weird charges or have debriefed or told or anything like that. See, because there's a big optical illusion and people think that just because you're on the other side, you're a dropout, that you've had to debrief or tell on your crime partners or camaradas or whatever the case may be. But in a lot of cases, that's not the truth. That's not how it works. Guys can actually go to the other side or put on the other side for safety and security concerns because the administration knows that if they go back to that general population yard, they're probably going to be hit. And there's a lot of guys that do choose to sign off that chrono and go back to the general population yard and take their chances, and they're quickly discovered and they're removed again. So eventually with them SNY yards, that's what they were all about. They were meant and implemented to put guys who had safety and security concerns over there for whatever reason. And it doesn't mean that they're a punk. It doesn't mean that their trigger fingers stop working. It doesn't mean that they don't still know how to make knives. You got to understand, everybody starts out on that same linea, on that same line. Everybody starts out as a general population inmate or convict. It's up to you and your career what you choose and decide to do or how it goes. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you're put in a position or in a situation that's rather unbecoming and you end up where you end up. You're still doing time. The time doesn't stop. That's one thing for sure. You're still within the California system behind them walls for whatever prison. It could be the same exact prison, just different yards. I've been to prisons where 1 yard is general population, A yard or B yard, and then C yard and D yard are SNY. So it's, and you're going to get out, you're going to tell your homeboy, hey, Holmes, I was at Pleasant Valley, or hey, I was at New Folsom, or hey, homie, I was just paroled from Tehachapi. And the first thing people are going to ask you, what yard? What yard? When it comes to the Norteño movement, yards flip all the time. I remember going to prison and one time, Susanville being non-active, not a good yard. You couldn't go there. You had a curfew. You got there, you had 72 hours to get off where you were mad at. You couldn't stay and function on that yard. And then a year later, going back to prison, and now Susanville is an active yard. It's a functioning yard, and you could stay there. The same prison where you would have got to and couldn't stay, same soil, same ground, same cops working, same everything, same buildings. Because what was considered to be trash was functioning on that yard, you could not be there. So it's a trip, man. In the California system, you never know where you're going to end up. Now, with them having non-designated yards and integrated yards and what they're doing, it's kind of hard to decipher where you're going to go and what you're going to do because it changes every day. And I know that the CDCR is doing that. They're implementing that for a reason. There's a big reason behind that. And the reason is they're trying to not reintegrate and you know, they're going to put out there that they want people to get along and they want, you know, everyone to learn how to function together so that way when you go back into society. But a lot of these guys on these level 4s are lifers. They're never getting out. They have, you know, I mean, Buck Rogers dates. And that's what we used to call them back then. Buck Rogers dates, you know, they're never going to see the light of day. There's no reason to integrate them with guys to teach them how to be social or how to learn and live in society when they're never going to see society. That's all they know. So they have nothing to lose. There's no hope. And with no hope, there becomes a chip on his shoulder. And the last thing you want to see is a prisoner, a convict with a chip on his shoulder because you never know what you're going to get that day. Life is like a box of chocolates. And if you run into the wrong dude, he'll melt your shit. True stories, right? So there's a lot of groups that don't consider themselves SNY gangs or dropout gangs, but that's what they're labeled. That's what they're looked at from the outside looking in. And the independent riders are one of them. So like I said, they were founded in the Riverside County Jail. When this guy was not allowed to become involved with the 2-5ers, he decided to start his own thing. And that's what it takes, man. It usually, I'm not saying that's what it takes in trying to promote that. I'm saying that's what usually happens. One guy goes against the grain and decides, man, he's going to start his own thing. And there's been so many of them guys because everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody thinks they have what it takes and they're cut from that cloth to be a leader, but not everybody can be a chief. There's a lot of Indians, but you can't be a chief, right? Very few have the mouthpiece, the charisma, the tenacity to do that. It takes a lot, okay? A lot of these big 4 that are spoken on in the California system, they started with one guy's, you know, his thoughts, his dreams, what he wanted to do. But it took several other individuals and sacrifices, ultimate sacrifices, to make that thing what it is today. The founding fathers of whatever group. You know, you have founding fathers from the North, the South. And I hate to say the North and South because for those that really know the history on the big 4, besides the BGF and the AB, which are comprised of blacks and whites, when it comes to the North and South, it gets tricky because there really was no North and South back then when these groups were started. It was more so guys from Southern California established both groups. Facts, truth, right? That's the real history of it. And then Norteños and Southsiders didn't come along till later, okay? And they were utilized as soldados. They were the voices, the ears, the eyes, and the everything of them yards because, you know, guys that were from the big 4 were automatically started to become slammed back in them shoes, getting indeterminates. They were no longer able to function on them yards. Now, since the end of hostilities was established, they are now able to function on the yards. Getting back to what CDCR is trying to do with this integration and everything with all these different gangs. And what they're trying to do basically is figure out a reason to get these individuals who they feel pose a threat back, slammed down. You know, and they're going to do whatever they have to do. If they have to make sacrifices, if they have to use inmates, you know, to sacrifice each other, then it just is what it is, man. It's a cutthroat game. It's a money game. It's a big business. Prison is a big business, man. And again, it just is what it is, okay? Those that have been there and know, they know. So with the independent riders, the reason why they're not spoken on is because they're not a very big group. And this group, albeit it's a little bit of everyone. They have whites, they have Mexicans, they have blacks, Asians. That group has held on like in Vogue. They're still around after a couple decades. And I've always wondered how they were able to hold on. And the reason is the guys that established that, the guys that continue to be from there, albeit they're not very deep, they do hold it down wherever they go. They are a little bit rowdy. You know, I guess a lot of the guys, there are a lot of lifers that are involved in that group. And when they become part of that, I don't know their rules and their constitution and what they got going on. Like I said, every dropout gang has certain rules. They stick to their own. Now, they have been at war with the 2-5ers for a lot of years, man. They have been at war with that group. And I think that all started or maybe stemmed from the original guy not being able to be part of the 2-5er group. But it could have been something totally different. You know, don't take my word for it. I wasn't the fucking cucaracha on the wall when the guys went to guerra. But like we just seen in the video a while back, the one I posted and several others posted about the New Folsom incident, when that youngster from the 2-5s was slaughtered, basically butchered in that day room, cuffed to that table. You know, those were guys from 2 different dropout gangs. You know, Nuestro Cosa, which is an offshoot of the Northern Riders. And kind of the brief history on them is, they were founded and started by a guy allegedly named Scrappy Diaz, who didn't see eye to eye with Snoop from the Northern Riders for whatever reason, and decided, man, that he was going to stick to the old ways. See, when the Northern Riders started, they kind of were still, a lot of them still had that burning flame in their heart when it came to the Northern cause. They were against active Norteños and functioning up under the NF. They were against the structure and a lot of the hardships and the struggle and the cause that they were having to go through. But they still had love for their roots and for their homelands and for their cities in Northern California. So that's why they had the name the Norteño Riders, because they still considered themselves Norteños, only they were like an offshoot or a different group. They were basically still Norteños, but didn't function up under the rules that were already implemented there. They wanted to be rogue and do their own thing. That was Snoop's philosophy. That's what he put out there. That's what they ran with. Somewhere along the line, his philosophies changed. He wanted to take his group in a different direction. And there was a lot of guys that were originally part of the Northern Riders that didn't want to do that, But Snoop being as charismatic in the way he is, it's hard to defy leadership. So, Scrappy Diaz decided to do that. He suffered the repercussions and he started his own clica, Nuestro Cosa. And that's pretty much that. So that video you seen in New Folsom of the guy getting booked, that was a monster from the NCs and another dude from the Independent Riders who came together because they had a common enemy, which was the 2-5er, and they butchered them, right? But this is something that goes back and forth, especially with the Independent Riders. They're at guerra, they're at war. They don't function on the same yards. And it's crazy that you would think that, everyone always talks about general population and, bulldogs not being allowed to be on certain yards with North or South, because as soon as they get there, and we've seen a video on that too, they're getting taken off on, they're getting ran up on. The bulldogs to the North and South are, even though they are active, they are functioning, they are considered trash to these groups. They are considered the opposition, and they are to be removed off said yards quick. They can't function on them yards. Have they before? Yes, in the past they have functioned with Norteños and Southsiders on yards, but the Bulldogs decided that they no longer wanted to function with them. They decided that it was all-out war, and so these two groups, and albeit now because of the end of hostilities, they click up together to get these what they consider degenerates or trash or basura off the fucking yard. That's what you've seen, man. It's a crazy game. Like I said, the California prison system is all over the place. It's changed a lot. So a lot of people talk about what happens on the general population, but the SNY side has their gangs too. They have their wars going on. A lot of these times when you see people like A Convict's Perspective or Renegade Media, they put their channels based upon a lot of prison murders and things that are happening currently. Whereas mine, I don't really speak on too much current issues. I will speak on trending issues when it comes to the hip hop community or gangs. But as far as inside prison, very rarely I do though. That's how I started out. That's not how I'm going to end up. And that's just based on my interpretation of my channel, what I want to do. But ain't nothing wrong with it. If that's the route they're going, that's cool. They're the go-to guys when it comes to that. So, when you see a lot of these murders they talk about that are happening a lot lately, people see it and they automatically assume, oh shit, it's the active side getting off. But it very rarely is. It very rarely is. Remember, they're at an end of hostilities. They're cleaning up trash and doing pegadas. Yes, absolutely. That will never change. That will never stop. There's not a rule or regulation that could change that. There's always going to be trash and there's always going to be a trash man. That's just it. But most of these pegadas and most of these murders that are happening in the California system are happening on the SNY side, the non-active side. Okay? Because a lot of these gangs are at war, because what you have is on them SNY yards, you have people that are in there for weird charges, people that are in there for telling, people that are just scared to be on certain yards. And then you have dropouts, validated, certified dropouts, and then you have people that are just non-active or whatever. And so these gangs are basically trying to extort these people or fighting over that, you know, or for whatever reason, man. Maybe they just don't get along because you're not from where they're from. It's more youth authority type rules and regulations on the SNY yard. It's more wild, wild west. Anybody can get it. There's no one to answer to other than your group. But a lot of guys don't even care then. If they wake up on the wrong side of the bed, they're just going to whack you straight up. So it's pretty dangerous. Now, the independent riders, I think the reason why they're still around is this war and this hatred for the 2-5ers has sustained them. You know, I don't know if they still recruit or if they're deep in numbers, but I'm pretty sure when guys get to these yards that have them, that are non-affiliated, that are just regular dropouts, that get to these yards, you know, they kind of gravitate towards that. And that's how they build their numbers. Again, the 2-5ers are on the majority of the yards, whereas the Northern Riders are on the majority of the other yards. Okay, they're the deepest SNY groups or dropout gangs, but the independent riders do have their little strongholds. So I'm sure if a guy gets there, a youngster that's not laced up, he gets indoctrinated and you know, the philosophy gets dropped on him and whatever. And if he decides to join that, he does. But they are on green light with the 2-5ers. They are at war. Now imagine these groups. They're all fighting amongst each other and within themselves against each other. It's basically dropout versus dropout. And at the same time, they always got to think, you know, because they're always going to be at war with the general population as well, the active. So, you know, again, when it comes to the independent riders, they're slept on or not talked about. And I think the only reason that they fly under the radar is just because they don't have the numbers. You know, they don't have the numbers. And so it seems like they're really not doing or making much noise. But like you've seen in that video in New Folsom, that guy was an independent rider. They're definitely making noise. They're definitely not slept on within the system and they're watched. There's other groups like the Zapatistas and other groups that have came along the way that have, you know, that are looked at differently. You know, I know when the Zapatistas, and I don't want to speak on them too much, but I know that that group is comprised of lifers, hitters. You have to have bodies under your belt to even be affiliated with them, you know. And I remember first hearing that and thinking, why would they take the revolutionary name Zapatista and twist it? But it seems like traditionally gangs have always done that. They take a symbol that is meant to be good and utilize that for themselves, whether it be the Bulldogs taking the Bulldog, the Norteños taking the Huelga bird, you know, the Zapatistas taking that name. You know, people have always took, or the 2-5ers taking the quarter, they have always took these symbolizations and utilized it for their own. So anyways, that's a brief history on the independent riders. I don't know too much about them. I just know they're a group that's not very large, but they were able to sustain, and they're definitely at war with the 2-5ers, man. And it goes back and forth. If you look up California prison gang news and things like that, you know, I get it all the time. I watch it just because I'm interested in it. And it's not because I like to see bad things. I want to see everyone prosper and unite and get along. But at the end of the day, I come from that lifestyle, so I like to keep up on it to the best of my abilities. Anyways, with that being said, man, I'm dropping banger after banger after banger. Bangers giving each other piggyback rides. Tortas getting banged in the back. I got all kinds of shit going on, man. We are going to be starting tomorrow. Super Sureño episode 1. You guys ready for that? Today, we got some Superwood, and you never know what we got on the plate. Maybe some Super Norteño. Maybe we might do Super Sureño episode 1 today. One never knows, does one. With that being said, I hope that you move smooth with a purpose. Get everything that you want coming. And remember, at the end of the day, it's all about the strive, the struggle, the struggle, the strive. That was a little brief history of what's actually going on in the CDC system, but it gets deeper than that, much deeper. With that being said, thumbs up, thumbs down. Heavy's going to be the head that wears the crown. I'm going to continue to strive, struggle, struggle, and strive for what I honestly and truly believe in. And that's the betterment of all people. Like, share, subscribe, share all my videos, man. Let's build this empire together. I appreciate it. The Gun.